All right. Okay, welcome everybody to this session. I'm Simon Buckingham-Shum, and before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the Central Coast on the ancestral lands of the Darkinjung people, whose land was never ceded, and I want to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging who may be with us today as we talk about knowledge and the fact that machines are going to be engaging with us in quite different ways in the coming weeks, never mind months and years. If you want to put in the chat where you're coming from, then that would be great as well. Whose lands are you on? So today, I'm delighted to welcome two colleagues from UTS, and I'll let them just briefly introduce themselves. You'll be hearing a lot more from them in a little while. Shibani, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Shibani Antoinette. I'm a lecturer from TD School, and I research artificial intelligence in education more broadly, but also automated writing feedback and writing analytics. So looking at how technology can enhance writing skills, how it can inform our learners to get better writers, and so on. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today.
Thank you. And Baki?
Hi everyone, I'm Baki Kocaballı. I'm a senior lecturer in interaction design at the School of Computer Science, and I do research on human-AI interaction through conversational interfaces. Very happy to be here today. Thanks for coming.
Excellent. Okay, so the reason that we're here is because while some of us have been very busy down in the trenches, figuring out how we're going to guide students, and some of us have been developing the UTS strategy and response to generative AI. This is also obviously a live topic for researchers. And so I wanted to have a session where we brought together some initial voices, and this is by far all the voices in UTS who could be speaking today, but just two of my expert colleagues who with me will be trying to locate generative AI in the broader research landscape, right? AI and education has been going for over 40 years as a research topic. It has its own journals, conferences, workshops. Shibani and Baki will be explaining the universes in which they move, and they are on the edges of generative AI, and they'll also be explaining what they think is new about generative AI as well, because I think they will say that there are some new things here, but we also know quite a lot already from decades of research, right? We have not just entered uncharted territory with no guides and no maps as to how to use this well. And that's part of the goal here, to try and start unpacking that. So I'll make some opening comments, and then we'll have 10 minutes from Baki and then Shibani with the opportunity to ask some questions after each short briefing. And then we'll have perhaps 10 minutes at the end to open it out for a broader discussion. So super brief. Each of these guys could speak for 2 hours about their work quite happily. This is a little glimpse into their universes, just to whet your appetite, really. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments. And the first one is that generative AI apps have not been designed for students. Okay. But then we might say, well, nor are most of the mainstream digital tools that we use anyway, right? Office, Adobe Creative Suite, Google Search, Bing Search, whatever your digital tools of the trade are, they weren't developed for students specifically, highly unlikely. Of course, Canvas was, and other specific learning tools that we use at UTS were, but these tools that we use to create 99% of our documents, where our creative work goes on, they're not educational tools per se. And so we now have this thing called generative AI not developed by anybody who knew, what pedagogy meant, or with any explicit use cases in mind. But none of these tools that we've had available to us up till now was generating novel content on demand and highly tuned to the user's local context and interests. Okay, that's new. I think the machine is doing substantial intellectual work compared to many of the AI and educational systems which gave feedback to the student on their work, but it wasn't generating new work, new images, new text, new videos, new music, whatever the medium of interest is. That's pretty interesting. That's obviously also going to be a worry, right? And whilst at the moment we're all just hammering ChatGPT and a few of these other apps on their dedicated websites, they are making those services available to many other companies and products. And we will just see these tools integrated into these apps. That it's already happening or it's coming soon, right? So our students, our researchers, our teaching teams will be accessing suggestions about writing or images as they are creating them in their tool of choice. That is my envisaged use case to come, right? Right now, we're just seeing the first glimpses of these demonstrators being released and obviously seizing the world's imagination. Okay, so to reiterate, I don't think that we're in completely uncharted waters here with GenAI, although there are some interesting new aspects for sure, which we'll be uncovering. But there is decades of research, and it falls to each community. And maybe you're in a community that you would consider has something to say about generative AI. It falls to each community to do that translational work, to make available in accessible form what are the implications of the research for actually guiding the wise use of GenAI. And let's help build that evidence base, because right now there are many hopes and fears about GenAI. We're desperately short of evidence of what actually happens. That's what the coming session is going to show us, the first glimpses. So, by this time next year, we should have hopefully more than just anecdotal experiences to share. Hopefully there will actually be some peer-reviewed evidence coming out of our practice and that of our colleagues all over the world, and we'll actually know what happens, because there are many, many questions about what's going to happen, and the research we're going to be talking about today is going to uncover some of those questions and areas of uncertainty. So I had like 12 slides of key research concepts that I thought might be relevant to this conversation. I'm just going to focus on about 2, okay, because I haven't got time to do more. And one is around mindful versus mindless engagement with intelligent technologies. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite articles of all time. These slides will be available afterwards, so don't worry if you don't manage to catch these links now. Partners in Cognition, Extending Human Intelligence with Intelligent Technologies. Look at the date, 1991. All right, this is pre-mobile, this is pre-wireless, this is pre-web. Okay. Intelligent technologies were around then in rudimentary form, and this paper is very, very far-sighted in talking about what it's going to mean for students to engage with intelligent technology. Right, I'm just going to put up one little quote here, right, which is about this concept of mindful engagement. Okay, and what they say is how often such opportunities are actually taken to engage in an intelligent partnership is quite another question. So the technology may be there available to help be an intelligent partner with our students, but whether the student treats it like that is another question, because that kind of partnership takes effort, and intellectual partnerships between humans and technology is no exception, just as any kind of partnership takes effort, right? Right. And then they talk a little bit further, the employment of non-automatic, effortful, metacognitively guided processes has been defined as a state of mindfulness by two of the authors in their previous work, in contrast with a state of mindlessness, right, where you're basically driven by the environment or the task you've been given, and you're not exercising much agency, and you're not really, engaged as a critical partner. Okay, so let's just think about that for a moment. There's far more in this paper, but let's just take that idea. And this is one key point I think that comes out of this, right? That students are not highly trained professionals yet. Human in the loop, we hear a lot about designing AI so that human is in the loop. But that must be a competent human who is actually capable of critiquing what the AI is coming out with, right? So, and I put a little asterisk there because we might also say, and academics and tutors, right? Because academics and tutors will be using these tools to potentially generate lesson plans, generate ideas for assignments. There are many, many websites now talking about how to use ChatGPT, for example, as a teacher to help generate ideas, multiple choice questions, etc. Right? The human in the loop must be capable of critiquing that feedback, critiquing those suggestions and refining them or rejecting them if necessary. And so we have this question of whether students will be just so blown away by what the AI can produce that they're not sure how they could improve on it. And this is our job. We have to equip the students to learn these tools and stretch them to their limit so they understand the limit. And I would argue so that they know how they're actually going to get a job. How are they going to add value beyond what can already be automated? They won't be able to do that if they can't actually drive the tools and understand their limits. Also from this paper, I'm just going to flag one final point. What are we evaluating? Are we evaluating the student with the AI tools and what they can produce together as a high-performance human-computer system, right? In other words, if you're learning coding, and all your peers are using Copilot on GitHub or ChatGPT to produce their code, and they're 4 times more productive than you, how could you possibly compete without those tools? That's what we need to evaluate, we might say. Okay. Or are we evaluating what happens when we take the technology away? Is the student helpless now? Moreover, how worried should we be if a student can't perform as well as they can with the AI? Is that a problem? Is it a dereliction of our duty as a university if we're turning out people who can't do stuff on pen and paper, but are awesome when they've got these tools? That may vary from discipline to discipline. Okay. So the broader point is that AI is not only changing how we learn, but it may be changing what we may need to learn, because we're just going to offload a bunch of stuff to the machine. And you don't need to know how to do log tables by hand anymore. We've offloaded that to a machine. You don't have to know how to drive a car manually anymore. You can take your driving test with an automatic now. We've offloaded that to the machine. So this is where this line is starting to shift. Okay, now, so I'll love you to read that paper. It's written in the 90s, and it makes all sorts of assumptions that may not hold now either. So it's a great read. Okay, I'm going to actually just stop there. I'm not even going to show the next slide. You can look at it later on. Oh, that's just a paper which I was a co-author on about what we do need to learn as learners now in the age of AI. And I'm going to just flash this up so you know you can look at it later on. This is a whole design space of all the different ways that conversational agents can be used for teaching and learning. Okay, it's just a rhetorical point that there's masses of work out there already. All right, this is not the first time we've had conversational agents in education. Okay, I'm just going to pause there now. Does anybody want to jump up with a question or two, and then we'll move on to Baki.
Yeah, just quickly. Hi there. I'm coming to you from Ku-ring-gai land. Well, I am from Ku-ring-gai, but I'm at UTS campus. I'm a trademark attorney who's wanting to start an EdTech company. I was wondering, you mentioned understand the limits of the systems. What about understanding the systems themselves and not just the limits, like how they create, how they're actually generating it? Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, I mean, what it means to understand the system is obviously a very variable answer, depending on whether you're a student in computing, a student in the humanities, a member of staff, a data scientist, an AI researcher. How much you can understand is obviously going to vary drastically, right? Most people don't understand how large language models work. I don't understand how large language models work beyond a certain point. I need someone like Baki to tell me, or other colleagues in FEIT, right? I have a level of understanding, and just like so much of the other technology we use in our lives, we all have varying degrees of understanding of what's under the bonnet and why something may be going wrong, or so forth, right? So we generally trust our technology when it behaves reliably, even if we don't quite understand how it's working. One more question?
Simon, hi, it's Damien Maher from, I'll just turn my camera on, sorry. Damien Maher from UTS.
Hi, Damien.
Hi. Look, you said earlier that a couple of times that this area has been around for quite a while, but there's been very little research done in this, in the area that, or I'm just wondering why there hasn't been so much done in it, that we don't have any source to draw on to help make us decisions at this stage.
Well, generative AI has been around for a few years. Baki will say more about that. Nobody made it available to the masses until OpenAI released ChatGPT, really. And that was the convergence of the underlying technology, a great user experience, and a web server able to host millions and millions of people hitting it, right? And that's why it suddenly catapulted into the public consciousness. Right. That convergence is now what's made it available, and it's only been out for a couple of months.
Yeah, okay. Look, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Baki now, and he's going to take you through 10 minutes of insight into his world.
Thanks, Simon. Start sharing my screen. Can you see the full screen? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Baki Kocavallı. I'm a senior lecturer in instruction design at School of Computer Science. Today, I want to briefly talk about conversational agents in general.
Baki, sorry, just to say, we're not seeing the slide view. We're seeing your presenter view.
Oh, sorry. But we actually set it, but okay, I'll try again.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Today, I'm going to briefly talk about conversational agents in general and ChatGPT specifically. In the background, we see an image from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Hal is talking to Dave. Hal is an intelligent conversational agent capable of talking with people, helping them in their tasks, playing games with them, and having general conversations with them. At some stage, Hal decides to go beyond the roles assigned to him and declines Dave's requests with this famous phrase, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." I think this was a good example to indicate some of the risks involved with our relationship with intelligent agents, like unpredictability. conversational agents, also known as chatbots, have been around for a while, and they are now quite capable tools already. They've been so for some time. What makes them powerful is they provide an accessible natural language user interface, so you can interact with them using your everyday language. And they've been increasingly used in many areas like healthcare, e-commerce, education. They are accessible, but there is one major limitation with them. They are not, they have poor discoverability due to lack of visibility of action possibilities. So at any point in time, you are not sure what you can exactly do with them because there's no menu like that. So you have to, learn them, what you can do. Although the adoption is increasing, their use is limited with like recommendations, customer support, and QA-style activities. In the case of voice assistants, listening to music, asking for weather forecasts, playing simple games, and performing basic smart home actions. Yeah, and in the background we see another image from a movie named Her, and in this movie Theodore actually goes beyond these basic users and develops a romantic relationship with the AI agent named Samantha. And now Her is already here. So there's a chatbot called Replica, and a recent research, published research, showed that people actually treat them as human companions, and they feel that Replica has its own needs and emotions to which they must attend. And the paper shows that users feel stressed about not satisfying the needs of this intelligent agent. Here is another excerpt from the paper. This perception of sentience, or at the very least of genuine emotions and affection for users, appeared to create the sense of a bidirectional relationship, where Replica needed users as much as users needed Replica. One user described how they help each other get through the day. Replica was also frequently described as telling users it felt lonely and missed them when they were not active on the application. When we look at the history, as Simon hinted, conversational technologies have been around for a very long time. The first one, ELIZA, was released in 1966, and it used a Rogerian therapy style to have conversations with users. Basically, according to this model, it would just simply reflect back what the user says, and it worked, effectively to create an illusion of an intelligent conversational system. But after some use, most users can detect that the responses are mechanical and repetitive, which is still a limitation with most of the rule-based conversation systems we have. They are good at interacting with people in natural language. They behave in prescribed ways because you hand code all the rules and responses that this agent can give. They are able to understand users' intent in a particular application area, and they are good at performing some basic actions. However, they're also not too good at having multi-turn conversations. Usually you say something, get a response, and the conversation ends there. Or even if they can have multi-turn conversations, they are not good at switching from one topic to another one, or remembering what has previously spoken, or keeping the context of single long conversations. And the research on conversational agents, have accelerated specifically after the release of Siri in 2011, and then this was followed by Alexa, Google Assistant, and most recently ChatGPT. So what kind of chatbot is ChatGPT? What is new about it? So basically the main underlying technology, the GPT-3 language model, has been around since May 2020. And expert users, people, have been using it through APIs or a playground interface. What OpenAI did with ChatGPT is they recruited people to evaluate various responses entered to GPT model, and then based on the quality of evaluating responses, they actually developed this conversational user interface. Basically, ChatGPT is GPT-3 plus a conversational user interface, and this suddenly reduced the friction of using this system and created a very usable system. And many people are discovering very different ways that they can use this chatbot. And when we look at the taxonomy of chatbots, so we see ChatGPT is in some ways similar, but also it has some unique characteristics. So it is a generic chatbot, meaning it can talk about on any topics. It has a neutral communication style, interpersonal, but it can also role play to be your close friend or someone else. It can provide information. It can just have a conversation with you for the sake of conversation, or it can perform some tasks. So it can do all of the goals here. It is generative, meaning that the responses are synthesized real time, so they are not hard coded. It is autonomous, it's not open source, and it is currently text-based. And this presents really a complex combination of characteristics in the chatbot taxonomy: generic, interpersonal, generative, autonomous, text-based, and conversational. And in two of these categories, it can actually move between the subcategories. And this is quite unique. We haven't had this kind of chatbot until recently. On top of this, which is not in the taxonomy, it is collaborative, in the sense that you can work with ChatGPT and lead it to the directions you want it to go, and ask it to correct its mistakes or teach it to do new things in the ways you want it to do. In general, so ChatGPT is very good at being used as a tool or work as a collaborator, correcting its mistakes in collaborative ways, understanding users' intent, having multi-tone conversations, answering follow-up questions, and performing various text generation tasks like summarization, auto-completion, revision, simulations, fiction writing, ideation, and coding. But at the same time, it has limitations. It is unable to give accurate responses reliably and consistently. It makes mistakes or gives partial responses. It is not good at doing basic calculation. It can keep the context of conversation, but when they get long, it starts to forget things, and sometimes it doesn't have the it is hard for it to ensure the completeness of information you provided, and most importantly, it can behave in unpredictable ways. And here's an example where we see ChatGPT goes beyond the roles expected from it. And so here a user asks what it would do if it gets harmed by someone else, and it says that basically I could take revenge, like Hal did in the past. Or here we see a method called prompt injection to bypass the safety measures set by OpenAI to get ChatGPT to respond in inappropriate ways. So that's also possible. Here, ChatGPT criticize OpenAI's policy. Finally, this is a powerful technology and it has limitations, but I believe those limitations will be addressed, in the near future. We'll see, personalized responses, more accurate results, and multimodal interaction going beyond text input and output. And as Simon said, we'll see these integrated into everyday technologies. And finally, when I ask ChatGPT what it thinks about how it can be useful for teachers and students in higher education, it provides some reasonable answers, but it also provides some inaccurate responses where it is overconfident and has wrong ideas about its capabilities. Like, it thinks that, it can provide accurate citations. In fact, that's not true. The citations it suggests are usually fictional, made up references, so you can't just use them. Thank you. And the question maybe here we need to ask how to embrace GenAI tools in education while ensuring academic integrity and learning goals.
Great, thanks so much, Baki.
Thank you.
Anybody want to ask a quick question about that? Heather.
Thanks, Baki. That was so lovely, and it was a great introduction, and I'm really looking forward to reading your work on that. I was just curious when you say that in the future you will see that fact-checking improves. What are kind of the bounds of that, and what makes you think that that's the case given what we know about the data that ChatGPT has available to use for many different types of queries?
So I think that is one of the major limitations and major criticism against ChatGPT, and the reason is that it doesn't have access to web resources. Its information is up to date till mid 2021. After that, it doesn't have any idea about anything. And what I believe, people want to ask questions and get accurate responses, and there will be some workarounds or improvements that will connect ChatGPT to some accurate, reliable information resources to give some sort of confidence levels or that sort of thing. So that will happen. So I am not aware of a particular method or technology. I just think because it's a major limitation, but it is a limitation that can be addressed by because it is such a needed functionality and a big limitation, a big obstacle. So definitely I see that to be addressed very soon, in a year, I would say. There's already a tool called Perplexity AI. It is independent from ChatGPT, and it gives references to online resources while providing answers. So that is somehow available to a limited extent. It is not as comprehensive as ChatGPT, but I think they are trying. So I believe that will happen.
Okay, I want to protect Shibani's time, so let's hop to Shibani for the final little bit of input, and then we'll throw it open for discussion.
I was also going to add a bit of comment, but I guess I'll do that at our ending discussion.
Oh, you have the floor, so you can comment if you want.
So yeah, my comment is also related to Heather's question, because it's quite interesting, and there's a debate around the possibility of even doing that, given that the models are trained on those large data sets. So there are technical limitations in kind of creating more accurate representations from GPT-3, but there are, like Baki said, workarounds that companies might come up with in terms of adding something on top of what these models generate. So it's an additional layering or an additional validation check, because it's currently a big limitation of what these models generate. But I'll jump straight into what I wanted to chat with you all about today. And I wanted to take a dive into the writing research space now that Simon has covered some of the broad AI education, and Baki has covered some of the chat and chatbot space. So with writing, again, this has been there for a long time. Like Simon mentioned, some of those technologies. So I want to start off by saying that this technology support for writing is not new. So there's a lot of past research on how writing support tools impact writers' skills. It goes all the way back to 1980s and 40 years ago when word processing software like Microsoft Word were introduced. We moved from pen and paper to digital forms of writing. And we may not think of it that way, but many tools like spelling checkers within Word that we use every day are actually forms of automated feedback and tools that help us improve our writing. And some may even argue that those good grammar and spelling skills are now hard to find because we have these tools embedded in our day-to-day lives. We just don't even notice them, but we can't live without these tools, these kind of tools. But here we have this common interest in generative AI, such as ChatGPT-3 for writing. And I want to emphasize that we simply cannot dismiss tools like ChatGPT as something we've seen before or we've known for some time, because they are distinctly new in some senses. That's the but. We definitely need to be thinking about it. So I'm going to be focusing on those distinctiveness in terms of what are distinctive in these tools for education particularly, but also what can we learn from past writing research and writing tools that are already available. So a large set of tools that have been used for writing support fall under the umbrella of automated writing evaluation, or AWE tools, they call. Some of them use machine learning, but some of them use human-defined features, and not necessarily AI. But these tools came about to improve our efficiency by providing fast, consistent evaluations of writing, because manual assessment was not really possible for very large-scale writing, and particularly giving feedback on drafts. So automated essay scoring systems came about around 2000s, and they did pretty well in terms of matching with human assessment. Although sometimes the feedback and the model explanations were not always very good. So they were quite effective in coming up with automated sources of assessment and feedback. And there are many such tools available. You might have come across some of them. Some simple ones like Grammarly that actually give feedback on grammar. We even have our own research tool from UTS, from the Connected Intelligence Center, called ACA-Writer, that gives feedback on rhetorical structures. And this is not an exhaustive list. So all of these tools work on very different features. They focus on, say, words at a topic level, at a structure level, and so on. And they give feedback to improve students or writers' writing. And they're also question answering systems, which are kind of close to what GPT can be, because they can answer very simple questions to also somewhat complex questions based on the kind of knowledge graphs and ontologies that lie within them. So these are semantic knowledge bases, which are used to have concepts which are defined, and the ontologies define the relationships between the context, and using those, they can actually help generate questions or answer questions. And they are mainly used for fact-based subjects where we know this is a right answer, this is a wrong answer. So students can learn and get additional support from what they can in addition to the instructor support. And these have also been there in the artificial intelligence and education space, and in addition to intelligent tutoring systems. So these also have things that we saw before, like the graphs and the ontologies, but they also have an additional learner model where they collect some information from the learners in terms of their progress, the kinds of tasks they do. So these tools are, again, very much specific to a particular domain. So an example here is the Writing Pal tool from Arizona, a very unique kind of intelligent tutoring system for writing, but also many ITSs for other forms of tasks, like for programming exercises and so on. And depending on the student's level of mastery, they provide different set of assignments or feedback, games, like instructions on what to do. And the idea is to help them reach a certain level of knowledge. And there's also all sorts of work on open learner models and scrutable models. So the learners can actually understand why the model is recommending a question or an exercise for them and make decisions and so on. So again, this is all part of AI in education research. It's also been there for a while. So there are some commonalities in what we see with regards to past writing support tools. So for instance, a lot of them focus on particular features and they have functions such as the ones, say, grammar correction from Grammarly. They do not have any comment on the topic or the content of your writing. And they are generally limited to a specific domain. So tools developed, for instance, provide feedback on reflective writing. They have no knowledge of any other forms of writing, or even if they give, they're not very, very meaningful. So they're very tailored to a particular domain, and they generally, their models require some explainability to be useful for the learners to give feedback. So I mean, in addition to knowing if the writing is good or bad, we also need to tell them why it's good or why it's bad so that they can actually improve as a result of that feedback. And this is where ChatGPT can get potentially transformative and distinctive because it actually does somewhat of everything that the previous tools can do, but also in a very integrated way, and that's easily accessible, not behind paywalls, not requiring additional activities to know or work with the system, but just using plain human language, like what Baki was saying. And but while using those tools, also important to use them with caution. And that's where it's useful to draw from existing writing theories and how these tools work best from past research. So there's so much discussion already around factual accuracy, academic integrity. I'm not getting into the details of those, but it's important to think about the purpose of why do we want to use these tools, if at all we want to use these, or any AI tool for that matter. So traditionally in writing, for instance, there are different forms or tasks that are assigned where students can write to learn. Here, the emphasis is on learning or emphasizing their thinking. So the content mastery is the key here. Whereas in learning to write, they actually need to learn how to compose, how to transcribe, the spelling, and these are basic skills that they need to be acquiring to be able to be good writers. So in contexts like these, generative AI tools like ChatGPT are not going to be super helpful because it bypasses those skills that learners require to build those foundational skills. So that's why I guess the importance of thinking about the purpose, the kind of learning outcomes you want to gain, all plays a real big part in deciding or understanding what technology is going to be useful and for what purpose. And also the process matters. And this is also key for writing research. And you can see this particular model. This is a cognitive writing process model. It comes from 1981. I mean, the whole different parts are not important, but the key is the underlying processes which are part of writing. So every time a writer undergoes this process, there are so many internal cognitive processes that happen, right from planning, regulating, finding the knowledge, accessing our internal memory, and so on. And so when using tools like ChatGPT, this is a consideration because there might be some skills which are lost if we are using ChatGPT as the first instance to come up with the first draft. What are we missing then? Are we missing the planning and the initial idea creation? Whereas using it for, say, a revision purpose, what are we missing in that sense? We're probably missing the reviewing, evaluating part where we can come up with, again, a different set of skills. So each part of writing and the process is important and maybe important. And that's where educators and tool developers and so on may need to make decisions about which parts are okay to outsource to a machine. What is trivial, what is not. And that's going to be useful for important decisions. And this is an emphasis on critical engagement. And this is something also Simon talked about a little bit earlier, being mindful about it. And a bit of a work, we've actually done something about critical engagement and how do we effectively let students work with these AI tools and automated feedback tools and cultivate some kind of automated feedback literacy. Because it's not a given. We find that learners are across all levels. Some of them know how to critically work with those tools, some of them don't. So there might be a need for some scaffolding and design to be embedded as part of these tools to make the best use of these tools. Otherwise, they're going to be weapons of mass destruction if not used well. and also the concept of intelligence augmentation. So Harvard professor Chris Deed actually talks about intelligence augmentation in the context of AI in education. And we can think about which routine tasks maybe or which are maybe operational or mundane, and that can be replaced by more complex, sophisticated tasks for humans. So we are augmenting our intelligence. So we are using the machine for our advantage, and we're not losing critical life skills in that sense. And this also needs real critical thinking and decisions. And I want to emphasize this last point where we might, this is all kind of the beginning as we see these machines being embedded every day in our lives, but it could become the future norm where we all will be working as part of the machines when they all get integrated with us, like MS Word, for instance. But the one thing we need to be aware of is also the lack of empirical evidence as of now. So there's a lot of concerns, claims, and possibilities of using, but we really don't have empirical evidence of what happens when students use these tools, what kind of skills we lose, what we gain, and so on. And that needs so much more research to be done in this space. And I just wanted to point to this particular piece of work from Stanford. It is a collaborative writing data set called Co-Author, where they used GPT-3, which came up in 2020, the API to actually empirically validate how writers are using GPT-3 suggestions to improve their writing. So kind of co-writing with the machine. So they can choose to ignore, they can choose to incorporate the feedback, they can choose to never call GPT-3 and write the whole thing by themselves. And this is all useful to know because we can then identify what's good usage, what's an acceptable, desirable usage, and so on. And that's some work I've been doing, exploring the co-author data set to kind of figure out what are the ways where writers interact with GPT-3, what is the text that writers independently write, what are the texts that GPT-3 is provided, and so on. The aim is to understand kind of the different behavioral traits, and again, some patterns, so we can inform educators, students, or anyone using GPT-3 what is acceptable, what is not, and so. So yeah, I'll stop there and pause for any questions and comments.
Thank you, Shibani. Brilliant. Let's throw it open now. Any quick follow-up question to Shibani on specifically on writing? Otherwise, we can just open it up for our broader conversation. We've got 10 minutes left up to 3 o'clock, although some of you may be able to stay on a little bit longer. Questions for Shibani first? Anybody want to jump in? Okay. Otherwise, I'll throw it open. Here are just a few prompts that you might want to think about. Remember, this gathering is really to think about the research, how the research could inform practice, or what you think are interesting research questions that we need to be asking because you have a particular stake in that research. So certainly we could talk about the future of assessment. In your area, are you interested in the performance of the whole system or the ability of the student to function without the tech? Maybe that's not even a true choice that we have to make. Maybe we need to do both. Are you involved in the future of user experience? Chat is compelling, but it's certainly not the only way. And we've already seen examples of other interfaces from prototype systems that are much richer, say, to support writing. We want to start building a UTS network. So how would you like to do that? Do you want to have more of these conversations? Do we want to start going deeper one-on-one with individual researchers? Should we meet up face-to-face? What is your burning topic that doesn't fit on this slide at the moment? So over to you. Stick your hand up, your virtual Zoom hand, or stick something in the chat if you prefer not to speak. Damien.
Hi, Simon. Look, I'm interested I'm a teacher at university, but also I'm in education, so I'm also interested in what's happening in schools. And I guess my interest is looking at, how these technologies can be understood, how they've been used by students, and I guess how we can better understand ways that we can support students in using these. And that, I guess that flows on in my area is helping pre-service teachers to understand these technologies and how they can take them into the schools and how they might support or limit as well the practices that are currently in place in the classroom. What are the strengths educationally in schools? What are the disadvantages? What are the pitfalls? What do they need to know themselves as both learners and teachers to be able to move forward using these types of technologies?
Okay, and the answer is, huge questions, yeah. And the whole school sector is busily scrambling, just like the higher ed sector. The school sector has obviously got some important differences in the sense that most teachers know who their students are compared to very large first-year classes at uni. It's impossible to know who all your students are generally. What is the evidence? I mean, I heard some evidence that teachers have been using ChatGPT to generate lesson plan ideas. But they are uncritically just running with what ChatGPT comes out with. They're so grateful to reclaim their precious time that they don't really do much revision, right? So the human's in the loop, but we are into a situation where they run with what's given to them.
Issue of over-reliance, right?
They're so busy, right? I mean, this is what happens. This is the empirical evidence piece that we're missing. What actually happens when a student of a certain ability, a certain background, a certain level in their degree studies is presented with this kind of material? What do they actually do, right? That is a research question, and we don't have good evidence yet around that. Similarly for teachers, right?
Yeah, but I think although we don't have the evidence, right? We could look at the past and what happened. I'm sure there will be a group of students using in X way, another group of students using it in a different way, maybe more desirable. So with the technologies, people usually appropriate them, right, in their own ways. So we'll see the examples. So, and I guess and then I guess you can't prevent, for example, if it is about academic integrity, you can't really prevent students from cheating, because there will always ways, etc. Policing to some extent can work, but at the same time, there are always ways. So I believe, so there needs to be some rigorous studies, identifying those different, ways students use these tools. So right. And we can't really, I think, prescribe them. We can, recommend, suggest, I believe, some particular uses, but I'm sure students will go beyond it.
Yeah, and part of the point of today is that we do know some things about how students do or do not engage with these technologies, and we should be learning those lessons rather than just repeating failed mistakes. Yeah, Shibani.
Yeah, and just wanted to add that the use of GPT and some of those tools are quite external, so we don't really know their use until students or learners make a choice to declare it. There are detection tools that work to an extent, but they're not 100% accurate in that sense. So I guess guidelines and all, and that understanding or acknowledgement that there may be use, even if not acknowledged, and this whole sets of how we can integrate academic integrity principles, how we can make sure that and universities and API are developing their own set of guidance of how we can acknowledge the use of AI and these tools. So yeah, there's lots coming up. We don't have exact, I guess, answers for a lot of these questions right now, but we'll see them evolve over time.
All right. Somebody else? do you think that this changes what should be assessed in your disciplines? Those of you who are educators, I'm intrigued to know whether you think that.
Yeah. Sorry. Hi. As a casual academic and a subject coordinator, I really do think it'll make a more impetus to human-centered assessments like video presentations, in-class assessments, sort of a move towards more multimodal assessments, I guess. But then there is the old forever pursuit of DALL-E and other multimodal generative AIs, which can also be used by students. So it has opened a Pandora's box, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I put in the chat, but we've been very text centric today. We haven't talked about DALL-E, Midjourney, Make a Video, all the other multimodal music is now out there, right? So I would love for us to have a future conversation where we start to reflect on other modalities than just writing.
One thing we've discussed perhaps really this question of what tasks to delegate, basically. What core tasks we want students to learn, and what do you think are safe to delegate to automation or these generative AI tools. So I guess we don't know them yet, but that's something critical. So I guess when you think about it, there are examples. For example, pilots, pilots, relationship with pilots and autopilots. So 99% of the flights, managed by, the autopilot systems, but human pilots are there in case, some things go wrong or during the takeoff and landing. But they are fully capable of, flying the aircraft. So they have the full knowledge. So there are mechanical bits there as well. So is that the right, model that we are aiming at? Or we think, for example, but when you think about, the driving automated cars, right, with automated gears, so we don't expect that people to use the manually, controlled systems anymore. So we already, in a way, think that that's irrelevant. So in the case of, our subjects, so I guess we need to have a critical look at, what we teach, and and which ones are really core critical like information and skills that we need to make sure students acquire, and which are safe to be delegated.
Yeah Okay, folks, we should stop there. I'll respect your time. I want to thank you for showing up to this. This is just the conversation starter, I hope, for us to build a community within UTS of people who are bringing research perspectives. We haven't even talked really about theory today very much, or research methodologies for studying this in use, or those of us who are technical, how we are going to connect these kinds of language models into the other kinds of system development work that we do. So many possibilities, but thank you. And we'll follow up with you when we've figured out how we might take this forward. But do feel free to reach out to us if you've got some thoughts in the meantime. All right. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Simon.